What's up, Ego Hackers? Welcome to the C.S. Joseph podcast. I'm your host, C.S. Joseph. It's absolutely a fantastically beautiful day today. Not a cloud in the sky. Nice spring morning. And decided that I could not participate. So yeah, just enjoying myself out here with a cigar and talking psychology with you folks this morning. So yeah, today's question comes from an acolyte. Acolytes are people who get an acolyte membership, and then when they do, they get a question per month that I answer in the form of a podcast or a YouTube episode, or also sometimes Chris Taylor does as well, because he's one of our experts that we have here on the team relating to Jungian analytical psychology and four sides dynamics. And hopefully we'll be seeing a lot more of Chris in the very near future. You know, I got to go on vacation too sometimes, right? If you want to be an acolyte member, make sure you're a journeyman member first, csjoseph.live/members. Or if you already are and you want to upgrade acolyte, csjoseph.live/portal to do that. So today's question is relating to the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone is this new understanding, fundamental new understanding of cognitive functions that literally no one else is even talking about. But it's basically the concept behind the Rosetta Stone is cognitive origins being produced and consumed by individual functions, basically, such that every human being actually has all cognitive origins in them, and they are producing them or consuming them at certain times. And this provides a new layer to ego hacking. So this specific question is related directly to ego hacking, also known as social engineering, but ego hacking is a form of social engineering that is specific to four sides dynamics and ultimately this science that we talk about here and that we discuss on the channel. So with all that being said, to understand the Rosetta Stone, you guys might want to consider getting access to the EgoHacking by Text Masterclass, and that is available at offers.csjoseph.live/EBT-masterclass. However, in order for you to get it, you still have to have purchased the course, the actual EBT course as well, and that's at egohackingbytext.com. So this question is related to the Rosetta Stone, and the Rosetta Stone is basically this thing where it keeps track of which, it's as powerful as the type grid, basically. But what it does is that it's able to keep track of which function produces and consumes which cognitive origin at which time, basically. And that's super important to know from an ego hacking perspective. Now, granted, one of the concepts that was actually provided in the Ego Hacking by Text course is where we discussed how to actually ego hack somebody using cognitive origins. Cognitive origins would represent really good attack surface from a social engineering perspective. Reason why. So, but anyway, obviously that from a ego hacking perspective, having the attack surface and knowing what attack surface you have for your subject or your target that you're attempting to ego hack is absolutely necessary to know. And knowing their cognitive origin is important. Why? Because cognitive origins represent the one thing out of life that every person is going for, every person wants, cognitive origin. The thing is that while they have their main primary cognitive origin that's attached to their type, their individual functions are looking for cognitive origins as well. Especially if they're consuming cognitive origins, and when they cognitive transition into, like, from their ego to their subconscious or from their ego into their unconscious, basically that cognitive transition through gateway circuits that happens as guided by the guidance circuits. So whether or not the guidance circuits are doing it or not determines whether or not it's a chaotic or orderly transition, right? And depending on if it's a chaotic and orderly transition, that actually directly affects cognitive origins from a functional level. Because while you may be producing or consuming certain cognitive origins in your ego, when you cognitive transition, all of that flips. And then all of a sudden you're not producing those origins anymore, you're consuming them. And then the origins that you were consuming, you were actually producing at that time while you're pulling off a cognitive transition. And knowing that is absolutely fundamental to your success, from an ego hacker perspective. This is why it's pretty fringe. It's fringe content. It goes way beyond the scope of what we talk about in our social engineering lecture series, which is season 21 playlist here on the YouTube channel and also on the podcast. Just listen to the season 21 episodes, and you'll see how it's done from a functional level. But it's not good enough. It really isn't good enough. There's so many layers to ego hacking beyond just the functions that actually make it easier. With the absolute best form of ego hacking, or at least the most efficient form of ego hacking, which can also potentially give you the best results, in my opinion, is ego hacking somebody by their octagram, basically. If you do it through their octagram and hack their nurture, you're likely to get something far more successful. So anyway, this question, since I haven't actually said what the question is yet, but I got to give a lot of additional context because this is a subject that's not actually really talked about here on YouTube or on the podcast very often. So basically, like, knowing origins is critical. And the question basically is that given that we know that the hero's primary origin is the inferior's secondary origin, and the hero's, it's always so funny how solipsistic humans are. They always just assume I'm filming them, even though I'm not. I'm filming myself. There's my own solipsism, right? It's so hilarious to me. Human beings, they're so silly. Funny. So funny. Whatever. So, anyway, the point is that, like, we know that the hero has its primary cognitive origin through the Rosetta Stone. We know that the inferior has its primary cognitive origin through the Rosetta Stone. However, they are flipped in terms of cognitive transition. When they transition from the ego and then they transition into the subconscious, they flip. So then the inferior's primary origin basically becomes, its secondary origin becomes its primary origin, and vice versa for the hero function, when the hero function becomes the new inferior. This is absolutely important to know. Why? Why is it important to know? It's important to know because it tells you, from a soft locking point of view. Soft locking is everything. Soft locking is basically the process of, targeting, behaving a certain way around a person, and then their functions are going to have to respond to your behavior from a pessimistic or optimistic perspective with your specific functions and their specific functions. Don't forget the rule. An optimistic function can only talk to its optimistic counterpart. It cannot talk to a pessimistic counterpart. So, for example, in the silver pair, if someone has NI parent, and let's say she's a woman, she's trying to get with me, she wants to make me feel wanted, she's not making my NE hero feel wanted. She's actually making my NE inferior of my ISFJ subconscious feel wanted, because my NE inferior of my ISFJ subconscious is pessimistic, whereas my expert intuition hero is optimistic. You see what I'm saying? So because of that, the ENTJ woman is soft locking me into my ISFJ subconscious in order to facilitate the relationship. And also that's what I would be doing to her. I'm soft locking her into her subconscious. So because we are doing this action of soft locking has a couple of results. The first result is obviously, it's actually the long-term result, it's not the short-term result. The long-term result of soft locking is that this actually changes a person's octagram. The younger they are, it changes their development. The older they are, it changes their cognitive focus. Okay, so that's what soft locking ultimately does, right? And that's important, right? That's entirely like that's a big deal, So that's one thing that has to happen. That has to work in that favor. But the other thing is too, the short-term benefit of soft locking is social engineering. It's ego hacking, basically, because then you are literally changing how the cognitive function actually responds in real time. So if you use a certain function willingly towards somebody else, depending if it's optimistic or pessimistic, you need to know which side of the mind you are soft locking them into for that particular moment of time. And once that happens, you instantly know if their origins are consuming or producing a specific origin, basically. And then all you have to do is give that, you either have to give or take. You have to take the origin that they're producing because you soft lock them and show them appreciation or gratitude for it, or you have to give them the origin that they're looking for, that they're all of a sudden consuming when you soft lock them in that position. And this facilitates ego hacking a lot better, like so much better. It's like extremely efficient. However, this method of ego hacking is extremely, it's extremely difficult. You have to be a master. You have to be a master at this. You have to have mastery over the Rosetta Stone. You have to have mastery over the temples, the temple wheels. You have to have mastery over, being able to type someone. You have to have mastery of knowing what their octagram is to really get at this level, where in real time, you're able to actually determine interactions super quick, which functions you're using, which functions they're using in response to you, how the soft locking is actually taking place, and then how their cognitive origins are switching from consumption to production, and then basically which origins need to give and take to them in the moment to facilitate the ideal interaction for that person in order for you to, fulfill some kind of ego hacking goal, right? That's ultimately how it works. That's a lot. This is why, people just tend to just stick with familiar people, or people they're willing to get familiar with. Like people that they can have high camaraderie with if they're a woman, or people they can have high compatibility with if they are a man, or for the purposes of a sexual relationship, just one compatible relationship for a woman, and then their primary compatible relationship, for a man, basically, the primary one. And that's ultimately the point of it. Human beings, regardless of being aware of psychology, at all, will just naturally, due to cognitive projection, due to soft locking, due to their nature, due to their nurture, will just naturally habitate around other human beings that they have positive natural proclivities for, and sometimes negative natural proclivities. Those negative natural proclivities may actually, assist, in their own personal growth, and that's camaraderie, basically. So, unless you're actually really trying to social engineer someone, it's not really going to do very much. And this is why, for example, kindred relationships are so difficult, because you soft lock each other into your superegos. And for example, you could be married to your kindred. For example, I'm an ENTP, and there's Railgun who's an ESTP. I'm married to her. But I soft lock her into her ENFP all the time. She soft locks me into our ESFP all the time, and we can't stop that. You can't stop being soft locked into our superegos. So then it's all of a sudden I've just manufactured an ENFP, and then it's oh dang, I'm in a sexual relationship all of a sudden with an ENFP, someone who's not very compatible with me. Or from her perspective, oh dang, I'm in a sexual relationship with an ESFP all of a sudden, someone who's not really compatible with me. So it takes a lot of energy, because all of a sudden those functions are basically becoming conscious in the moment, and you have to cater to those functions. This is the difficulty of soft locking, and this is why it's so important to know primary and secondary cognitive origins from production and consumption according to the Rosetta Stone. This is why you folks need to learn how to use the Rosetta Stone, which is kind of like a new form of type grade, except for cognitive functions to a point. And that's available within the masterclass for Ego Hacking by Text. Learn that so you can learn this, so you can get to a higher level of ego hacking. This is important, especially if you're married to somebody who has mismatched emotional compatibility. This is a pedagogue relationship, intrigue relationship, the trust relationship, and the kindred relationship. Those four relationships, I call them the fling relationships, because they have sexual compatibility but lack emotional compatibility. So they're kind of technically for short-term use, short-term recreational use, I guess some people would say. It's really hard to have a long-term relationship based on those. It's very difficult. Very, very, very difficult. So, from that point of view, it's really, really important that you guys understand soft locking, that you understand where these functions are going with producing and consuming. That's why this happens. That's why they have, your hero as a primary origin, and it has the inferior's primary origin as its secondary, or because they're gateway functions. The thing is, though, Every single function is that way. That's just how it is on the gateway circuit, but then it's the same thing on the guidance circuit. Guidance circuit being parent and child. If you want to learn more about gateway circuits and guidance circuits, please read John Bodine's article at csjoseph.life/blog. Read that article, get educated. It is the foundation for the upcoming course that we have coming out, EgoHacking Your Fear. So you can ego-hack yourself, basically, into being courageous or fearless in your life so that you can have the absolute highest success in your life that more than you could ever imagine, basically. And it is like our new personal growth series of content that we're making available, and it is the successor to Season 19 content. So you guys might want to check that out. Season 19 is only available behind the paywall. If you go to csjoseph.life/portal, you see the Discover XYZ type, those 16 tiny little membership logins. Each of those can be paid for individually for a one-time fee, or you can just get them all at once. If you have questions about that, email support@csjoseph.life to open a ticket. So anyway, I think I hammered that question pretty well. It's pretty complex, but we got through it. And in order to really understand this video, you guys are going to have to do a little bit more research based on what we have. This is getting in deep, very much, very, very deep. So anyway, folks, thanks for watching and listening. I'll see you guys in the next episode.